there are now some possibilities to get some automated ads, but my podcast is niche. So I distribute it to 16,000 people. It's good that it's in the 10%, but what comes usually in is $5-10 per month. And this doesn't cover the expenses. So this is basically where we stand. But it will definitely evolve. I'm positive that this medium, podcasting in general, becomes more and more relevant, especially in our industry. I learned in the last 12 months that people are basically information hungry when they're in the mood for making a decision. And with podcasts, we can service easily.
I know. I wonder if the other side of the table, if, large pharma, the things that we're talking about, if they would be interested in, whether it's their business development people or their marketing people, having an opportunity to share whatever narrative they want to share.
Mm.
And in that way, clearly you can generate capital for people like that. I could see sort of having a mix of, you have some people that you want to speak to, so you invite them and let's say it's gratis, versus people who want to be heard, right? That maybe you didn't invite, that invited themselves. And maybe in this way you could find, because, I think about it, how like Synthico and Lilly, there are places, large organizations that have their own podcasts. I don't know how much, interest they have and who's actually listening to them, but you seem to have an audience. And so I could see a couple of ways to sort of monetize and maybe do it full time, get yourself an intern to do the post and all of that.
I mean, this is a nice dream. Why not becoming the Joe Rogan of the pharma industry and have a nice audience? But what you said totally makes sense. I think, I'm biased, but I recommend everybody these days to use these tools. They are well established since 2020. Whenever I speak at conferences with business developers from pharma or with venture capitalists, they either listen to the episodes themselves when they think the CEO has an interesting target, or they use AI basically to just come through the web and find information. And when you do podcasts right, you get excellent ranking in search engines, and this is a great tool.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. I learned something today about podcasts.
Now, thanks that you are on my show, and pretty excited. I mean, you came from San Francisco to basically to Spain. I mean, Barcelona is a beautiful city, to speak at the Bio Europe. My first question to you is, what motivated you to leave beautiful San Francisco in California? I mean, it's basically I would say, the heaven for all kind of founders and scientists. Why did you come to Europe? What was your motivation?
Well, I really enjoy going to partner meetings. You get to meet a lot of folks. You hear a lot of talks. You can do a lot of one-on-one. That's really just more difficult to do virtually. And so that was actually the third stop on a 3-stop tour. I had actually started at a business development and licensing conference in San Francisco first. Then later on that day, got on a plane and flew out to Basel, because every year I attend, the LSX RNA Leaders EU. And then when I looked at the schedule, I was like, oh, it's only a couple of days difference. Let me get on I took a bus. I will never do that again, but let me get on a bus from Basel to Barcelona. I had never been to Barcelona, but to Barcelona, and let me attend Bio EU as well. And leading up to that, I'd reached out to all of these different organizations, and they were all kind enough to let me present or host or do something as part of their program. And so that is how I ended up in Barcelona. It was a great conference, and like you said, it's exactly where we met.
How was the trip from Basel to Barcelona by bus?
I will never do that again. I don't know why I thought like, oh, this will be a great idea. I can just sit back, relax on the bus. It was long. And in the Switzerland portion of it, we got stopped so many times by, I guess, maybe Border Patrol or some sort of patrol. And they come on the bus, they check everybody's passports. Sometimes they make people take their luggage out the bottom, they open it up. And so I will never do that one again. And in the beginning, it was fun, but then the seats got uncomfortable. It was just very long. I probably should have taken the train or a plane. Anything but the bus.
It's long. I mean, it was back in the 90s. It was a school trip. from Styria, it's in Austria, to Lloret de Mar. It's, I think, 100 kilometers north of Barcelona. It must be 60 miles or something. And
Yeah, it was something like
it's a day. It's spent 24 hours, basically.
it was something like a 6 hour ride or an 8 hour ride.
Oh,
I
8 hour
don't
ride is
really
okay.
remember the timing, but again, I will likely not do that again.
How was Bio Europe for you? What's your opinion about the European ecosystem?
Bio Europe is obviously smaller than Bio International in the US, but it's also one of the things that I like. Because
Mm.
at Bio International, it's really hard to just have inorganic meetings, right? Maybe if you happen to be sitting down at the bar or the restaurant or someone, you might meet someone, right next to you, but there tends to be so many people and everybody has sort of a packed agenda that there's really no time for just happenstance. Whereas Bio EU, that is the thing that I like. I have some partnering meetings down, some talks down, but really I just kind of spent time walking around, stopped at booths. Who did I see here? Oh, I recognize this person. Let's have a conversation. They're already talking to somebody else. Let me meet this person, and just on and on and on. And so I find the same thing at the LSX meetings in Europe. Is they're also set up that you can actually do networking in a way that's not, how do I say, for me, like aggressive. I am social, but it's very hard for me to walk up to someone and just randomly be like, hi, my name is, and this is what I need from you. Like a little more context is nice. And so that is what I enjoy most about just the European conferences in general.
Yeah, Bio International is huge. I think last year, Rich Masters was on my podcast. He was back then the CMO of Bio, and he said 18,000 people in Boston.
Yeah.
And this year I had Biocom Joe Bonetta on my podcast, and he said he expects 20,000 people to San Diego. So it's and I think Bio Europe Spring is 2,500 people, so it's a little bit smaller.
Yes, it's a lot, and especially if you at the time, the last time I went to Bio International, I was still working for Lilly, and so then you have you're on a mission. You're doing 50 meetings, 50 one-on-ones, like 50 speed dates, and you're giving talks and you're doing these things that you don't even have like a breath to actually go out and do, like I said, sort of inorganic networking. So yeah, I much enjoyed it this year.
Let me ask you the first question after the sidestep to the bios. You are in science and business, and I'm always fascinated by people with this dual role, science and business. What sparked your interest in science and business?
It's from really early on in my career, I would say even grad school, I knew that I did not want a career in the laboratory. I mean, I love science. And the thing that always disillusioned me was that you do all of this work to publish a paper. And maybe if you're lucky, lots of people cite it. But for the most part, I felt like that was it. Like it just kind of died in the literature. And for me, that felt really unfulfilling. And I wanted to do something that I felt like it had more impact. And so back then I really wasn't sure what that was going to be. But then I did a postdoc at UC San Diego. My PI was Dr. Robert Pomeroy. And in that lab, he was really focused on doing translational science. So taking your science and bringing it out, into the world, making it come to life. That lab was really focused on developing, what was it, renewable sources to replace petroleum. So they made products like foams and plastics and fuels. And I was really inspired watching them. Right as I left, they spun out a company. It was called Algenesis, and now they currently make algae-derived products, such as like surfboards and shoes that the public buys. And so, when I started working in pharma, I really knew that I wanted to be like at that same sort of transitional interface. And for me, that meant the business of science, or business and science. And so really that's how I ended up there.
What were the main stations in your career?
I'm sorry?
What were the main stops, the main companies, the main engagements in your career?
So technically I've only worked for two companies. I right out of my postdoc, I started working at Janssen. I was employee number 3 in there. At the time, it was called the Oligonucleotide Center of Excellence. I was hired as an analytical chemist. Um, that that first role was really, I'll say, serendipitous. As employee number three and you're building a new lab, it's essentially a startup, but within a very large environment to where you're never going to run out of money. I would say that was the primary difference between that startup and a biotech, is that you knew where the money was coming from and you just kind of had to keep asking for more. But in that role, I built two labs from the ground up, which was a pretty good role for an analytical chemist straight out of postdoc. I also had the opportunity just to see how drug discovery works. I got to participate in everything from, how are we going to design this molecule all the way up to bringing it through IND. And so, I would say the thing that I did best there was I just wanted to be a part of everything. I just wanted to learn. So even if I didn't have a role, I was just always in the back of the room listening. Like, what questions, what are they talking about? What questions are being asked? What things should you be thinking about along the way? And then while I was doing that, because again, I knew that I wasn't going to stay in the lab, I'd done my MBA. I was sort of doing my MBA in the background. And so when I finished, there was an opening in operations. And so I kind of just transitioned over to operations, which, obviously I wasn't talking about science anymore, but now I got to see how pharma worked. So I wasn't sort of stuck in these four walls of the lab. I was engaging with heads of TAs, you're engaging with the entire organization. And so then that sort of gave me the business side of, oh, how does pharma make decisions? How do we know what indications we're going to work on? How do we make, just generally, how do we make decisions? And so, that was those two things put together were sort of an amazing experience for being literally right out of postdoc. And then the only other company I worked for before starting my own was Lilly. And that role as VP of External Strategy for Genetic Medicines, again, you're sort of at the business of science. And now I was able to take what I learned from Janssen and sort of apply that to Lilly. I didn't do external strategy at Janssen, but I now understood, how pharma works, which was also super important when I transitioned to that company. So yeah, two jobs, two companies, 10 years, roughly 10 years, and then sort of doing my own thing right now.
Yeah, time flies when you have fun.
Hmm?
10 years, time flies when you have fun. 10 years is like
Yeah, is
nothing.
that what it is? Yes, time flies. Time flies.
That's true. What motivated you to do an MBA?
Again, knowing that I wanted to sort of be at that interface, I started applying to non-science roles, both internally and externally at Janssen, maybe 1 year, 1.5 years after I got started. And I didn't have any traction. I wouldn't get any responses to my applications. And, I'd go talk to people and they're like, well, I look at your resume and it says chemistry, chemistry, chemistry. So, who's to say that you can do strategy? Who's to say that you can do operations? And so after about a year of hearing nothing, I decided that, okay, let me go back and do this MBA as just a proof point that, hey, I can think about other things other than chemistry and I can be good at them. And so, I tell you, by the time even before I graduated, by the time I put, okay, I am working on this MBA, now when I applied to roles, I at least got responses from all of them. I at least got a first round interview from all of them. So it really changed sort of that trajectory. That is what I needed to get from the lab to sort of, the business side of pharma.
You started basically as a scientist, did a postdoc, built labs from the ground up, have vast experience in drug discovery from lead selection, lead optimization up to IND. Got a business background, worked in big pharma companies and in startups, and now
Yeah.
have your own company and your own consultancy. What I'm interested in from your perspective, I mean, the entire spectrum from early stage, from science up to market entry. What are the big challenges these days in innovation in drug development?
Challenges in innovation. I mean, by the very nature, like innovation is difficult. whether it's having enough money on the biotech side to keep things going, or knowing what it is that, big pharma wants, or being on the big pharma side and having to prioritize, because while you have a lot of capital, you still can't do everything. And when you want to be let's see, a first mover on the pharma side, right? You want to get in early. You don't know what good looks like yet. And so you are really committing a large amount of capital to something that you hope, right? You hope you're going to use the best of your knowledge, but you do a lot of learning through those first iterations. And hindsight is always 2020. And so at least in my world of RNA being a relatively new modality, there's still a lot of things that we don't understand. But unless you take that risk, we're never going to get there. And so it's also what I like about innovation. I like trying to figure out, what's next, and okay, this happened. What does it mean? Okay, let's go do this thing. And so it's really what keeps me interested in the space, and it's different 100% of the time. Even if I'm talking about delivery and two people have, nanoparticles, they're going to behave different. Something's going to be different about them. And then trying to figure out how does that fit into our overall strategy, what we know, and how can we get a win out of what we have in front of us. That's what I enjoy doing.
That's good. That's great to hear. I mean, when I think back, I started in life science in 2006, and the first business case that I calculated was about 1 billion to develop a drug to the market, roughly a little bit above that. And it sounded huge. And 4 years ago, I learned, and also in the recent years, that the cost went up to 6 billion for a new drug. In your opinion, with your experience, why do we see this uptake in the industry that developing new drugs becomes more and more expensive every year?
COGS, the cost of goods of everything continually go up, whether it's, again, sort of in this RNA space, right? You have these molecules, they're basic, right? But then that you have to add extra chemistry to them to protect them from degradation. And then we have to figure out how to deliver them. So whether that's conjugated or a particle, that's its whole sort of chemistry in and of itself. And then you keep needing more specialized people, more and more and more. All those people want to get paid. You have the cost of living that goes up. When you combine it all together, right, and the amount of time that it takes, and everything is interdisciplinary. So you have tons of teams working on the same one molecule. It's, at least in the RNA space, it's going to be impossible to do it cheaply until we understand fully, right, how to design, how to deliver, how these things work. So then you can start sort of standardizing and sort of streamlining the process. But right now, it's still a lot of trial and error. We have some ideas, right? And until we reach that time, and also until there's some sort of reset button, right, on costs, it's going to continue to be expensive. I would say one other thing with RNA, different than maybe, let's say, a small molecule, is that given their potential to not just treat, but to sort of eradicate or cure a particular disease, I can see why there's perhaps a larger that there might be a larger cost to them, especially if they're one-time drugs. But I don't think that's what the problem is now. I think the problem is really manufacturing and cost of goods, and they all add up.
Yeah, there was in the last years, especially, there was a huge uptick in cost of goods. They just increased and exploded. When I think back to Bio Europe, at your panel, you emphasized especially strategic partnerships as one of the most important things. And I think also in the last 20 years, the landscape has tremendously evolved. How does drug development look like when we think about strategic partnerships? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, so this word strategic partnership, I think why I was using the word strategic is that just in general, biotechs or the field might use the word partnership broadly, but partnership means a lot of things. Is the partnership a direct equity investment? Is it a proof of concept or a material transfer agreement? Is it a strategic partnership? Sort of those things that you see in the news, the thing that everyone is going for, like big upfront payments and downstream milestones, right? Or was the partnership an acquisition, which at some point I guess becomes less of a partnership once you're acquired. So at Bio Europe, I was using the word strategic to differentiate it from other types of partnerships. Um, Again, it's sort of the thing that all biotechs are striving for because one, it provides you with a fair amount of non-dilutive capital, which is always useful, but it gives you an opportunity within a partnership to proof out your technology more. And along the way, as you're doing that, at least in most contracts, you have the rights to any improvement to your background IP. Depending on what your contracts look like, you might be able to go out and partner again somewhere else, maybe in the same space, or it just depends whether you have exclusive or non-exclusive relationships. So being in a strategic partnership not only is useful financially, but it also sends a signal to other potential partners like, okay, they've been vetted in some sort of way. And so, yeah, maybe now we see them as less risky. And so we want to go partner with them too.
Is it really possible to have with a pharma company a non-exclusive strategic partnership? I always thought that pharma is more when they see an opportunity in an asset and say, okay, it's interesting, they narrow down quite quickly and say, okay, we want to develop it to the market. And since the costs are so high, I mean, especially my understanding is from the industry that still the sweet spot overall is about phase 2 data. And so they have still to do the phase 3 market entry and also then refinance basically the production of the product and deliver it to the patient. So it's probably roughly still about 4 to 5 billion when you take that from phase 2 up to the market. Is a non-exclusive strategic partnerships really possible?
So obviously, exclusive partnerships is 99% of the game, right? Mm-hmm. And if you are working with another company or in this partnership to develop something new, it's going to be exclusive, right, to you and that partner. What you described for assets makes 100% sense. It's when you have platforms that it becomes maybe a little bit more fluid. I think most deals end up being target deals, right, on platforms. So, hey, I can create you a nanoparticle. I'm not going to give you all of, let's say, the CNS, because unless you really, really want to pay for it. But I will give you exclusivity on target A and target B, but you don't have exclusivity on the entire CNS. So I can go partner with someone else on C and E, right? And so are they non-exclusive? Not really, right? But are they all encompassing? The same way that, if you partner with an asset, that's it. You can't take that same asset and go give it to someone else. And so really that's what I meant about exclusivity, is that sort of depending on what it is that you're partnering, there is a slide scale on how exclusive that relationship can be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Platform technology. So when a company has that, they're in a good position to negotiate.
Yeah.
Generally, that's true. You spent basically, if I remember, if I understood it right in the beginning, your entire career in California. Is that the right understanding? So this basically you're an insider in the Californian ecosystem, basically. I would appreciate if you could spend a little bit on the ecosystem. The reason is quite simple. European startups in biotech, doesn't matter if they have assets or platform technology or a mixture of both. They usually hit the wall in Europe around Series A. So it's easy to start a company. It's easy to develop it, to get pre-seed, seed funding, public grants up to Series A. And then they need outside help. It's usually impossible to take a company public in Europe. Also, I think partnering, the major players are still, many of the major players are in the United States, and California is one of the, I think, target areas that European biotechs needs to investigate. And we can help them a little bit understand the biotech ecosystem in California better. My first question to you in this area is, what makes the California biotech ecosystem unique?
Yeah, so California is my home state, born and raised, so happy to talk about it a little bit. I think there's a few unique things about California. So first, the public university systems here, they're considered to be the best in the nation. You know, in the top, let's say 100 ranked universities, there are 12, maybe 12, 13, 14 public schools from California that rank in the top. So it's useful. Now, to call out the San Francisco Bay Area specifically, which is where I live, if you look at both the public and private research institutions, so you have like UC San Francisco, Stanford, Berkeley, Lawrence National Laboratory, they're all only within 40 miles of each other. And if you were to take that radius maybe a little bit broader, let's say to 100 miles, you could add in UC Davis and UC Santa Cruz, which are also all in the top 100. So first and foremost, it means that you have sort of like an ease of access to talent. And I think we all know at this point, for better or worse, that when you're looking for funding, one of the very first things they look at is the team. And then from that, they look at what is your pedigree, right? And they just start at which schools did you go to and who did you study for? And so just here in this area, you know, we have more than a dozen schools that would maybe fall on that list of, okay, this is a great school, or they studied under someone great. Okay, and then from that, you now have South San Francisco, which is considered the biotech hub. It's smack in the middle of all of those. And so that means that even from a pharma or a biotech point of view, they also have a pretty ease of access, right, to talent. You can kind of find everyone here. Obviously, there are venture capitals. So, you know, venture capitalists are the ones that built the biotech industry, with, you know, Genentech being the very first company, or the VC-backed biotech that was in San Francisco, right, in South San Francisco. And so, you know, 20 miles down the road from here at Sand Hill, there's lots of access to that, both formally and informally, right? Because these are still people. They're still human beings. They go out, they have dinner, they go places. And so if you know who you're looking for at any given time, right, you could probably run into one just casually. And so then if you also add on that life science real estate is booming here. It's very easy, more or less. It's very easy, lots of room to go get like a private lab. They're set up again in South San Francisco area, but also on both sides of the bay. They're established by all of these high-end universities. And so companies can roll right out of universities into a laboratory and still be close enough to, say, the university and pharma to leverage their resources. I think the last thing that's also useful is that California has founder-friendly laws, right, that kind of make it a nice place to innovate. So things like you get tax credits back to offset some of your R&D research. There's really strong IP laws here. There's an ease of incorporation, although most people do choose Delaware for better tax laws. But I think when you put all of those things together, it creates a pretty nice environment. You know, maybe if I add one other thing, I also think that, you know, the culture, the way in which people work, it's probably a little less, let's say, stern than other regions, is maybe a nice way to put it, and perhaps a bit more cooperative. And so I also think that it provides, you know, maybe a more welcoming or a little bit nicer or calmer environment to try to do entrepreneurship, which is going to be hard no matter where you are. But I think it provides a little bit more of a relaxed environment to try to succeed. So I think those are all the positives of California.
Why is it more relaxed in California?
It's just, you know, every region, whether, you know, within the United States or country, everybody has their own sort of their own character. And that happens to be, you know, California. So whether it's the surfing sort of image vibe, because we're on, you know, a coast with lots of sunshine, I think the sunshine also plays into just being a little happier, just a little bit more relaxed. It's just, you know, I'm not sure where that came from, but it absolutely is the general vibe to the state, which I enjoy. And so who knows, that may or may not be true. I have no stats on that, but yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, California is legendary. I mean, when I think about entrepreneurship, Apple started in California. Genentech in the 70s was the first real biotech
Yes.
company with this new model that venture capitalists invest in a novel technology that pharma simply ignored. It's my understanding of the Genentech story, and I think this established the biotech business model globally.
Yeah. The two founders, was it was one scientific founder, I don't remember the journalist's name, and one venture capitalist. And so venture capitalism, the very first firm started in, I think, 1972. And then the very first biotech was Genentech in 1976. And so it was one scientist, like I think a biochemist. So one scientist and one VC. And yeah, it's essentially the birth of what you know now to be the biotech hub in South San Francisco.
Genentech initiated the biotech hub in San Francisco.
Yes, they were they're considered to be the first venture-backed biotech in the South San Francisco space. So to be honest, down in the San Francisco, if you haven't been to the South San Francisco area, it used to be a dump. There's still a small dump over there. It was the honestly, it was the dump of San Francisco, right? So San Francisco was about 9 miles north, and you
Mhm.
could have Silicon Valley about 20 miles south, and in between there's the airport and then just some space. And that space used to be a very large dump. Now it is a small dump that has been built out to be biotech. And so when the wind is blowing maybe in the wrong direction and it's a little bit warm, you kind of get this quaff of what's that smell? And you're like, oh, it's just the dump.
Yeah,
I don't know if people knew that.
this is the smell of success then, in the end of the day.
Yes, the smell of success sometimes smells like a dump.
I think I've done a write-up it's on my LinkedIn. So it's Kleiner Perkins invested in Genentech. Bob Swanson was a 26
There you
year
go.
old back then, and huge success story. It was basically the Apple of the biotech industry.
Exactly. Exactly. And everything grew up from there. It's also why it's the largest. It was something like 65. They have a huge campus down here.
When I played the devil's advocate as a European, and I'm in Austria, Vienna is known for not being very friendly and a little bit negative. I want to say, well, I mean, we also in Europe have a lot of great universities. I mean, when I just think about the UK,
Mhm.
Oxford, Cambridge, I mean, we can discuss if it's still part of Europe after the Brexit, but they have great universities. We have great universities in Germany. We have great universities in France,
Yep.
in the Nordics, in Scandinavia. Uh, we also have funding with Horizon Europe. It's public grants, it's not venture capital, but it usually helps moving forward. We are doing not so good, in my opinion, when it comes to lab space. This would be an argument for California.
Mhm.
But what I think we completely lack in Europe, so this all in basic research, I think Europe is at par, in my opinion, as the devil's advocate and say, okay, it's not different. I mean, lifestyle, we also have Barcelona with a great beach.
Mhm.
And Spain has a great lifestyle, also the Côte d'Azur, southern France, and Italy, great lifestyle. When it comes to private funding and entrepreneurial spirit, I think California stands out. Um, when you think about your experience, you also traveled from Basel to Barcelona and saw a lot of Europe. When you
Mhm.
think about the entrepreneurial mindset in California and the experience you have with other regions of the world, why is it so different in California? Why? What makes it unique in the world?
Are you talking about the ability to raise funds, or maybe you
Uh,
can
the,
ask me that again?
the entrepreneurial spirit, why is it so unique in California that entrepreneurship is something
Ah,
special? I mean, I think California stands out when we think about entrepreneurs. In your opinion, what makes it so unique? Why is it so different in California?
I guess let me preface this with I am born, raised, educated, and employed in California. I have traveled to lots of countries, and as you mentioned, driven through some, but I've never lived other places, and so I feel like whatever insight I have to provide is maybe not as astute as it could be. Um, I was doing a little bit of, I'm trying to think, I was doing a little bit of research about California universities and such. I'm trying to remember, but it was the timing in which, let's say, the UC system was built. And prior to then, it was mostly just private schools, and only private schools can make decisions on who studies there and who doesn't study there, however they want. And when the UC and California State, the UC and California State system was being built, there was some legislation at the time that said, these schools should be public, and they should be built for everyone, and they should really focus on innovation. And so they had given land grants. Fun fact: most UCs are built on old military bases or old land, like land that was owned by the government. And so they were built with this in mind. And so again, if I maybe go back to the cooperativeness of them, you figure you have this UC system that has 10 campuses. By being in the same system, that alone connects them, and how they engage with each other, and how they share thoughts and research, and students, and all of that. And so I don't know if it's because it was actually built with this in mind, versus it was built to do one thing and then had to change its sort of philosophies about how it engaged with others. But I've gone to 3 UC schools. I did my undergrad at UC Irvine, I did my PhD at UC Riverside, and my postdoc at UC San Diego. And even coming down to taking classes, if I want to take a class, a chemistry class during the summer, I could take it at a different UC and get the same credit as if I took it at that UC. You can only do so many classes that way, but it was just sort of the point of, whether it's because they were built connected, and they were built with the idea of innovation, and they were built with the idea of being open to the public, not just a select few that could afford it. I even think that sort of diversity of people and experience and thought is what makes California a really strong place for innovation. Again, no hard numbers to back it up, but it's just my feeling, having lived here.
Our podcast is a great place for opinions, and I think statistics we can easily find it. But in these areas, especially when it comes to innovation, I think statistics do not really exist to back that up. It's a rather new topic, especially when you think about diversity in innovation. So my personal opinion is that innovation thrives best in a diverse field. With diverse,
100%.
I mean ethnicity, gender, social backgrounds. Thank you for confirming it. What I would like to ask you, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about it. Why is that so important for innovation, diversity?
Yeah, there was this quote that I used to like. I think it was from Albert Einstein, where it said that you can't solve problems using the same thinking that you use to create them, right? And so, for the Austrian, that you use to create them. And so, you get these homogeneous communities where it's like, okay, well, here's this private school, or this private, or this selective anything, and you look and think just like us, so you must be right. We're going to bring you in. And then you just get these populations of people that self-confirm their thoughts and their beliefs. Whereas when you pull in people from all sorts of backgrounds, right, all sorts of experiences, you tend to get more pushback, right? You don't get everyone saying, oh, sure, that's great, that's right. But that's what you need, right? So you can think a little bit deeper and think a little bit broader to get to a better solution. And I think that very much exemplifies the UC systems, that you can find everybody, right? You can find everybody there, and people have just, you could just look at the clubs. So, universities, they all have these different clubs and organizations. There's the Indian club, the Armenian club, the Chinese club, the Japanese club. Like, every nationality, every country has some kind of club represented on campus. There's the LGBTQ plus A plus club. There's anything you can think of, these clubs exist, which suggests that there's enough representation to actually have a club on campus. And so, that's always been my experience. I've grown up in this space, and so I really notice it when I leave. When you look around, and you're just like, oh, everybody looks alike, everybody sounds alike, everybody thinks alike. And then, it was just one of the things I love about being in California.
How diverse is California?
It's definitely about pockets. And so just like any other state, your university cities, your large universities will have the most diversity because people are coming in from all over the world to that place. And so I've always lived in larger cities. I've always lived near universities and or the coast. And so for me, like living in San Francisco, it's one of the best things about living in San Francisco. There's all sorts of people. You can kind of believe whatever you want to believe. You can do whatever you want to do without having too much sort of judgment or pushback about, this is not the right way to live or to do things. And so from my perspective, I've only lived in big cities, and so there's always everybody around. I've never lived in maybe more secluded areas where I don't know, maybe everyone is halfway related. I don't know. So yeah, at least from a big city point of view, you can always find everybody.
That's probably one of the explanations why California is so innovative. It's basically a melting pot of nationalities and social backgrounds. I think the
Yeah.
world is meeting in San Francisco.
Yeah. Well, San Diego is sort of evolving as well. I'm not sure because I lived in San Diego obviously for a while. I'm not sure if I consider it as diverse, but I know that they are growing. And again, it's right next to UC San Diego and San Diego State University, which are also both very large public universities, also on the top 100. So I think they'll get there.
And what about Los Angeles, in your opinion?
Yeah. So I did skip over Los Angeles, and so there's lots of pharma in Los Angeles, but my experience is that it's more of the med tech and device side, and that's not a space I've ever played in. So when I'm sort of looking at okay, who's hiring, what's going on, every time I see something pop up in LA, which is where my family lives, which is where my parents and my sister live, it's almost always in that device space, and so I just kind of look right over it as it's a little bit outside of my know-how.
Let me give you my biased opinion about innovation. When I think back to the
Okay.
90s in Europe, I always thought that the tech sector in Europe is similar to the tech sector in size and innovation than the tech sector in California. And somewhere, I think in 2000, 2008, I think just California took off, especially on the venture capital side. And Europe, in my opinion, just lost it. So there's not so much venture capital in Europe like in California. I'm interested in your opinion. Why has venture capital become so a strong force in California? Why has it developed so well? And I think it's outstanding compared to the rest of the world. I'm not aware of any other region with such a strong venture capital uh, scene that just finances innovation regardless of the outcome expectation. Why is that so strong in California? Why has that grown so strong?
I would say California as well as Boston, with respect to the U.S. And my answer is going to sound a little bit redundant, but when you look at how VCs are organized, they tend to invest regionally. They want to be able to see the CEOs that they invest in. They want to be able to engage with them often. And so, especially for smaller firms, right, they might only invest regionally, maybe California or Oregon or Nevada, somewhere around there. And so again, if you kind of think about the entire ecosystem, you have the talent that you're looking for. They're coming out of universities, or they're spinning out of large pharmas. So you have the universities, you have the pharma, you have a place for them to work in with sort of with the laboratories. And you say, okay, I'm going to invest regionally, so I need to be able to see and touch all these people. Where should I go? Well, why not go to the place that has all of the things that you need? And so I really say the only other comparator in the US, or the largest comparator in the US, is in fact Boston, because you have that same sort of ecosystem, right? You have a large pharma hub, you have investors, you have universities, your Harvards and Princetons and all of those sorts of things. And so I think it's not a coincidence that those are where the two hubs are.
But you don't have the Californian lifestyle in Boston, so
You do not. What you have is snow. I'm allergic to snow and cold. You do not have the positive sunshine 24, all year round.
it's all year round. It's from
Well,
January to
I mean,
December.
all year round is an exaggeration. I get very cold. I'm actually cold right now, but
Hmm.
I like to call it California cold. So it's 50s and 60s is cold, which I know is warm to other places, but it's how I feel cold.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. When let's assume that some biotech entrepreneur listens to the podcast and say, okay, I mean, I'm a Series A stage and funding is scarce in Europe. I need to find investors in California. Um, how should they approach entering the Californian ecosystem? What's your advice to them?
So, not just California VCs, but any venture capital, uh, getting a warm introduction is a great place to start, right? There's only so many venture capital or so many VC firms. While they have a lot of money, the money is still discrete, right? They're only going to make so many new investments, and the rest of the money is going to be used for follow-ons. Um, they're getting inundated all the time with requests. And so when you reach out cold, it's kind of like just applying cold to a job, right? You're just one application in a vast sea of applications. And it's hard to tell where should you go. Um, for any biotech worth their salt, their non-con deck is going to look great. All the data is it's going to say exactly what they want it to say. And they're going to build a story around exactly what they want it to say, right? No one should send stuff. Well, here's my data. It kind of sucks, but it's okay. Look at it anyhow, right? No one's going to do that. And so you got to figure that they have thousands of decks in front of them, which all look great. So the first thing you got to do is, hey, if they can get a warm intro from, let's say, one of their existing companies, or maybe there's another VC firm that they like to do syndicates with, right? Like, hey, this doesn't work for us because we're late stage, but here's an early stage. That warm intro goes a long, long ways, right? And even if it's, let's say, hey, I have a warm intro. I saw that you're going to be at BioU. We're going to be there. It'd be great if we can have a meeting. I'm going to send out a request through the bio platform, but having them know who you are ahead of time of that request also kind of goes a long ways. And so, you know, it's not easy for companies in California to get investment. It's just easier to have access to those places, right? They still kind of have to do the same thing, with the exception of maybe you went to school here, or maybe you've worked with people that they also know. And so that's probably my number one thing is when you reach out, if you can get someone that already knows that VC, that already has that relationship, to reach out on your behalf and say a nice few words about you, and then say, hey, it would be great at the very least just to maintain relationships, that VC is going to respond and they're going to look at your deck. Whether they look at it in earnest or not is another story. But it was the same thing when I was at Lilly. So someone would send an email with us together and say, hey, Renee, I'd like to introduce you to blank. And even if I didn't want anything to do with blank's technology because it was off scope, I felt obligated to say, hey, thank you for that introduction. Sure, let me look at your deck. Great. Let's have a 30-minute talk. Because it was less about the company and more about the relationship, but the company still got what it needed, was to get in front of, to get their stuff seen and at least get feedback from us. So that is my suggestion.
That's very helpful. One story of the opposite of success was when you talk about expectation, that someone said, okay, booked a room, JP Morgan, January. I flew there and I thought, I have a great company and I come back with money. And the disappointment was huge because they said they were not even talking with me. So it was so hard to get meetings. And when I flew back after 2 weeks, I had nothing. And it was a failure. When you hear this story, and you confirm it already, that's not the way how it works. So when you walk through this process, what's your recommendation to optimize it? So how should they structure the process of engaging with the Californian ecosystem? I mean, it's obviously not flying in for 2 weeks and coming home with 100 million.
Exactly. And so, the first thing I would say here is that you also have to understand the kind of conference that you're going to. And so JP Morgan is a place that many, let's say, large companies or maybe even VCs, they go to reconnect with their existing collaborators, or people, like, let's say there's already a term sheet going back and forth, or you're working on your definitive contract. They go to try to close those sorts of things and reconfirm. I'll give a great example from Lilly. Is JP Morgan was really not a place to go and find new things. It was a place to go and let's tie it up. Let's wrap up the things that we're working at so we can work on these things for the rest of the year, right? And so I would say that, as you're making your list and deciding who am I going to talk to, who am I going to go find out, don't waste your money flying across the world to meet with someone who doesn't want to meet people new there. I mean, yes, you might have an opportunity during the social events. That's really what the social events are about. Like, oh, I want to go find this person. You have your list. Where are they going to be at? You go find them, which is also hard to do. But so that would be the first thing, is to make sure that where you're going makes sense for the thing that it is that you want to do. Partnering meetings, your bios, your LSX. When people go there, that's exactly what they're going there to do, is to find something new, right? They're not going to necessarily talk to people that they already know, maybe just to say hi and that. So that was the first thing. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second half of the question?
The expectation was a fly-in.
Oh,
So the
yeah,
first learning,
got it.
the first learning obviously is do your research and do your homework before
Yes.
you go somewhere. And the second one
The
is then the
second,
expectation, I come home with money after 2 weeks.
right. You, I, I don't know why everyone thinks this, because whether it's VC or a partnership, you will never secure anything on a first conversation. That is not what a first conversation is about. Your only goal of your first conversation is to get a second conversation, is to spark enough interest, sort of sow the seed just enough that they want to come back and look for more, right? The oversell, like that first deck when they want to tell you everything and they're like, okay, great. So should we talk about a partnership now? And in your head, you just kind of laugh like, oh, this is clearly your first, this is clearly your first rodeo, because there's no version, right? With the exception of, let's say, um, things that you see on scripted TV, nobody just gets married off the first date. Nobody just sees each other, right? I know there are shows called, Married at First Sight, but in reality, you got to meet a few times. You got to date. You have to make sure that it's not just about the science, but it's about the team. And when you're talking about investment, it's more about the team than the science. If you're talking about investment from a VC versus a CVC, right? They want to get to know you. What are you about? If you're going to be selling, if you're going to try to get me to invest in delivery technology, do you have experts on your team? Or do those people all do like, does it line up? Right. So your first, even your first 2 or 3 meetings is about filling each other out, letting them sort of ask questions, presenting them with the type of information that they're interested in. And what they're interested in is they want to know about your team. They want to know about your sort of pipeline. Where do you fit in the landscape? What kind of possible return can they make? Because that's what venture capital is about, right? Is about the return. Those are the kind of conversations. Getting down into the weeds about your science and how it works and blah, 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 blah. It's not only is that not the first conversation, it's maybe not even the second or the third conversation, right? Because that's not why people invest necessarily. Yes, I need you to have good science, but good science is not always investable, right? And sometimes, yeah, good science, I'll leave there. Since good science is not always investable. Now, when you go to a CVC, so if you're going to go to, again, like say some large pharma and you want their venture arm to invest, well, they invest for different reasons. They don't typically invest for some kind of multiple. They invest because they want to get this science to a place that their company can partner with. Now, when you talk to them, the science matters more. The details of the science, I should say, matter more than when you're talking to a traditional VC whose motivations for investing are very different than the motivations of a CVC investing. And so when I say do your homework, I mean do your homework. Who are you talking to? Why would they want to invest in you? And if the answer is because my science is good, then you don't understand what's required
Yeah,
to get an investment.
I couldn't agree more. I think the expectation many people have on the market, like I get one consultant and 2 weeks later I have the introduction and 2 weeks later I have the money in the bank account, doesn't work. There was this funny movie, this movie about game theory. I think it was John Nash, the inventor of the Nash equilibrium. It's game theory. And it was a movie 20 years ago where he tried to hook up with a woman at the bar and he just said, I know what I want, and I know what you want, and you know what I want, and you know what you want. Why can't we skip the entire process and just go straight to your or my
Yep.
place? And she slapped him in the face and ran out. I think people get it when it comes to relationships these days. But
Mhm.
why can't we skip the entire process in deal structuring, in deal making? I mean, I know what the pharma company wants or what the VC wants. The VC knows what I need. Why do we need this process, this mating process also in deal structuring? What's your opinion about that?
I don't actually think you do know what you want up front. You have an idea
Mm.
of what you want on both sides. Again, if we're going to talk about dating, I think it's also very, very similar. But you have an idea of what you want, but it's not until you get to know the company, both directions, until you get to know what their actual strengths and weaknesses are, until you get to know, what can their technology really do and who's on their team, what skill sets do they have? Can you actually figure out, okay, this is how I want to engage with you? And you can't get that from just saying, you want a partner? You want a partner? Sure, let's partner, and then we'll figure it out at the end, like
As we go.
married at first sight. You actually need to know a whole lot about each other, both personally, because you also have to work with these people for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. How do they not just problem solve, but how do they solve disagreements? Is this person just going to completely have a meltdown, right? Or can you have reasonable conversation? Or is it going to be the other way where it's like, no, it's my way or the highway, to get out? Are the people you're working with, are they honest? When there's a problem, are they going to tell you that there's a problem? Are they going to try to hide or sort of move around that there's a problem? That's a problem. Because a lot of problems can be addressed and fixed if they're identified early on. It's the whole hiding it and lying about it that becomes a problem. And so, yeah, I'm going to challenge your premise. We don't know what we want. We don't know what it should look like yet until we get to know each other, and then we can decide exactly what that partnership is going to look like.
So
To me, it's the equivalent of a term sheet versus a definitive contract. A term sheet, you come together and you talk about high level, like, yeah, I think I want to do this 5 target deal, and I think it wants to be, I want to do it in the CNS, and I'm roughly interested in X, Y, and Z, and I'm okay with this money and da da da. And then you say, great, we agree on this term sheet, but the term sheet's non-binding for a reason. It's super high level and it doesn't have enough details. When you get to the definitive contract, and then you really have to get down into the weeds, that's when you realize, like, oh wait, I thought we were on the same page, but we're not. You want kids and I don't, or whatever the thing is. And it's why definitive contracts take so long to hammer out, because the details matter. Once you sign on the line, you are committed to them, both morally or ethically as well as legally. And sometimes you realize you don't like what you signed up for.
Yeah, that's true. So I think people set themselves up for failure when they have the expectations then that after one or two meetings, a significant
Yes.
deal is closed. Significant, I mean, anything above 10 million. Maybe a seed investment of 100,000 can be closed faster when it's a seed fund that has to deploy capital. But usually also when you go to later stages like clinical phase 2 assets or a platform technology, the expectation in pharma usually is then also it's more about years, not days that the deal closes. So we need this get to know each other phase. And in this phase, if I understood you right, people form their expectations towards a partnership. So if they're thinking and the expectation evolve during the negotiations and discussions. When I look at the deal process, so basically it's counterproductive when people then set up the first mail with a five-pager with 3 PDFs attached and a link to the data room. So it's basically far too much too early. Is that right? How do you see that?
I agree. It almost seems like you're coming on too strong. You should have all of those things ready. You should have those things available. But again, if this is venture capital and you've done your work to know, is this an early stage investor, right? What is roughly their check size that they like to invest? Because again, they'd like to have everyone wants to be at a certain position. They got to be sure that they can get enough out of it for what they're going to to put in. So if you're going to come to someone who's normally needs to have normal's check size is something like 5 million, and you come in asking for 100,000, you got to know that it's going to be no. It doesn't. The math doesn't math for them. But when you come in and you know who you're talking to, you just need to tell them the things that they want to hear to get their attention. They want to know about your team, who's on it, who's on your board, who are your advisors, although team is more important than those other two. What have they done in their life and their background to support them holding a role, holding a position on this team? Is your team diverse in background? So, do you have 5 chemists and no engineers? If you need an engineer, right? Do you have a biologist? Do you have enough competency internally to cover what it is that you say that you're going to do? Is there anyone on your team who's done this before, even if it was a failure, right? Is there anyone that has been on a startup that at least has an idea of what is required, right? They spend a lot of time on your team. Then it's what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve? And did someone say it was a problem, or did you say it was a problem, right? There used to be that whole, if you create it, they will come. That's not that space right now because this takes too long and it costs too much money, right? So it's more of what is the problem? Who said it was a problem? What type of data do you have to confirm that it is a problem? And if you fix this problem, is it just going to be a sort of like a marginal change in outcome? If so, it's not really a problem. It's an inconvenience. Or, are we going to rock the world? Are we going to fundamentally shift how something happens, or how people think? Or we went from not being able to treat Alzheimer's to yes, now we've cured it, right? Like, what is that change? And every venture capital firm has some sort of investment theory, right? It's not just necessarily which therapeutic area it is, right? It might be, hey, we want it to be in this therapeutic area, which is usually not that narrow, I should say. It's broader, right? But there's usually some sort of impact that is required. And again, doing your research to know what does this firm, what do they value, and then building your deck to that story, right? So you've talked about what the problem is. You've shown that the problem is actually significant and not marginal, and something that, if corrected, could make millions and billions of dollars, as well as help humanity, which is good because lots of people like to help humanity. And then, hey, here's my solution. Not all down in the weeds about your solution, because the person you're talking to probably doesn't understand all the weeds anyhow. They understand big picture, right? So here's my solution. Here's how it stacks up to other possible solutions. And then, here's our timeline for getting there, right? Like, we're going to do this. And to get through here, we need this much money. And this is why we need this much money. You don't have to have the broken down details on the slide, but you should have them on your Excel file, waiting to go should you get that interest. And this is how we're going to use the funds and blah, blah, blah. And that is the story that people want to see up front. It is not a 50-page, deck. It's like, it's maybe science is a little bit longer. It's like maybe a 10 deck, a 10 slider deck, not counting the title slide and the thank you and here's our information if you want to call us back slide. It's very concise. It's very to the point. And then when you get that call back, then you have a deck, your confidential deck, right? So up to this point, it's just non-con information, things that can be shared. Then you have your confidential deck that, okay, is going to have some more detail. You've already got them on the hook, right? They're at least interested. They've nibbled. Now give them more. But don't start with the full water hose wide open. You're a little bit wasting your time, and you're wasting their time. But you can always have that information ready to go. If somebody asks the question, hey, yeah, no problem. Here, let me pull up that slide for you. Or I have it in the appendix, whatever the case is. And that's the other thing. When you're presenting your deck, having appendix, not a problem, right? In case somebody asks, it's there. But it's very different than sending a deck that also has all this appendix. So you probably don't need that, right? Just the basic slides. And so, yeah, temper yourself.
Yes,
I know we're all excited. We all need money, but it's not going to happen on the first engagement. It's likely not going to happen on the second. So no need to go all in.
There's a lot of helpful information in there. I think I like this part where you said, is this really a problem or just an inconvenience? Or is it just a problem because you say so and nobody else is the problem?
Yeah.
I mean, the narcissistic approach would be, when I say it's a problem, but it doesn't work basically, I think, in venture capital.
No, because they need it to be a problem for enough people in the kind of way that you would shift their behavior if you solve this problem. Now, maybe that's a little bit more of a tech answer from a biotech answer that, fine, shift the behavior of how you prescribe drugs or, who's going to use what. But ultimately, you're looking to make a very large shift and thus an impact, or for them, a return.
I think the second interesting part, or helpful part in what you said is do your homework first. Also meaning find out whether you have really an investment case at hand that tackles a large problem on one hand and is also attractive to the VC world. You mentioned disruptive cases. So this nuance that you brought from inconvenience to problem to really change the way we live and we think. I think this makes a huge difference when approaching investors. When you just have inconveniences, you can pitch to thousands of investors, but I don't think this will move them.
Right. And, from the impact point of view, there are firms that they consider themselves impact firms, or let's say even large pharma who have funds, they have impact funds. And so, when you reach out, if you're talking to an impact fund, if you can't describe how your technology has huge impact, then, it's not going to happen. Now, people might say, but it's a drug. So, just by helping cure this thing, it's impactful. And I would argue with a different example. So let's say there is one of my clients that I work with. Well, I now sit on their board. So, full disclosure that I'm biased. But one of the reasons why I joined the company is because I thought that their technology had the ability to hit that impact. And if you remember when I started earlier, the reason why I was like, oh, I got to find something else to do besides the lab is I really want it to be impactful. And so, they're a delivery technology. The particles that they use come from algae. So already I like the fact that this is green and we don't have to use a bunch of organics to make these, right? But what they found out as they're testing is like, hey, we know that these are safe because it's actually the same kind of algae that is used in the wellness, the wellness space. Everyone's drinking their algae smoothies and taking their algae capsules. And so in general, we know the risk is low there. But what they discovered is that, you can load these with any type of payload, RNA, small molecule biologics. You could take it orally and, hey, it can withstand the sort of harsh environments of the GI tract. And then they loaded it with a vaccine and saw that, oh, wait, you can also get mucosal vaccination from this. And so then I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, so you're telling me that I could have a vaccination, it's stable at room temperature. So instead of having to worry about, let's say, cold chain supply, you're telling me that I could potentially deliver a vaccine in a capsule or a tablet? Well, to me, this is huge because when I think back to, let's say, COVID-19, the cold chain supply requirement was really a serious inhibitor for, let's say, equitable distribution of drugs. Any kind of developing country who, let's say, lacked the right infrastructure to be able to have like this ultra cold storage, I think it was like -70 or -80, something like that. Doses were prioritized away from them and towards countries with more capital. And okay, I get that there's some sort of operational thing to it, but at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to be rich, right, to be able to receive, in this case, life-saving vaccines. And so when I look at this company, I say, to me, this is hugely impactful. If you're telling me that by helping you, sort of build your company, I could maybe change the entire way that drugs, not just vaccines, but maybe even therapeutics are administered around the world, and take countries that, have largely been sort of deprioritized because they can't pay, and now be able to give them something. Like, to me, that is wildly impactful. And then why I was like, yes, let me sign up. And that's very different than saying, yes, I have a drug. Like, they also do, let's say they deliver eye medicine. Because it's stable, they can do eye droplets. Well, the current way of administering eye things is with a needle. Now, while I think it's amazing that you can deliver with a droplet, because who wants a needle in the eye? It's not the same kind of impact as saying, I can take, I can help tons of like millions of people in third world countries who aren't getting something, or, in developing countries who aren't getting something. And I can change the entire sort of supply chain such that that's no longer a problem. Both are useful, because I'm sure whoever is getting eye therapeutics would prefer a drop over a needle, but a different kind of impact to me than being able to say that we don't have to sort of repeat what happened with COVID-19 for future vaccines. And so, yeah, the example there being that there are places that invest only in things like, now I can deliver vaccines cold, at room temperature, versus other places that are like, okay, well, no, I'm just interested in things that I think that I can exit. So yeah, maybe having droplets over needles, I can make an exit with that. So sure, I'm going to invest, but I'm not going to invest with my impact fund, because it doesn't have global impact. It has, one-off sort of impacts. So hopefully that sort of explains the difference.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it's basically do your homework first and find out what kind of impact your technology creates, and then look at the venture scene, public funding, and also find out which funds might be interested in that kind of impact that you create, and what that impact is. You need to describe that first. And this is the basic homework. You need to be prepared. You need to have everything, all the material that basically a venture capitalist and impact funds and public funds require, prepared before you reach out. And then don't be overconfident. Don't pitch slap people and send them right away the contract where they have to sign because you have what they want. Be more subtle in the approach.
Yes. Don't send a CDA to a venture capital. No one's going to sign or an NDA. No one's going to sign that. You only send them information that you're willing to share 100%. Don't have a term sheet and ask somebody to sign a term sheet. By the very definition, term sheets are non-binding. So why are we asking for signatures? You just kind of have to, you don't have to be an expert in the process, because they know people are new, but you do need to do your homework enough to know not to do those sorts of things. And back to the whole do your homework, it's called an investment thesis. Every single firm has one. Before you reach out to one, you got to know what their investment thesis is. So I guarantee if you say, hey, I'm a pre-seed company looking for blank, and their investment thesis is we only invest in late stage companies, they're never going to make it past the first sentence, and you've wasted your time, and who knows, maybe even your reputation. You don't know who that person knows. So yeah, everybody has an investment thesis. At the very least, it's posted somewhere. If not posted, someone knows what the investment thesis is. Figure it out before you reach out, and most certainly before you have a face-to-face.
So basically, it makes sense to start talking to VCs very early. before you even are interested in pitching to them. Just get to know them, go to conferences, just meet them colloquially. I mean, we have in Europe bioequity. What I see from bio, they also have conferences where basically founders can meet with VCs without any expectation. And it's just networking at this stage so that people gather intel and learn which areas do these VCs like, which stage of the company do they like. And this is far away from any idea of doing a deal. It's just meeting people as a startup.
100%. Don't start trying to raise, to learn when you're ready to raise funds. Do all the legwork ahead of time so you can figure out, okay, this is where I'm headed. It's not an easy task.
So
I don't care how great your stuff is. Don't expect it to happen on day one.
Let me battle test my thesis with you. You have a lot of experience in the haven of venture capital, in the heaven of venture capital in California. So instead of introductions, for example, my thinking is that I rather say when you don't have time to build the relationships yourself, get people on your team that have the relationships in various roles. For example, when you see a CEO of a company and you see that VCs invested in that company already, and these VCs would also be a good match for you, why not ask the CEO if he wants to come on your board? Then
100%.
naturally it evolves and they will see it and you will get on the radar. Is this a good strategy?
Well, so whether they need to be on your board versus just give you a warm introduction are two very different things, right? Because the same way when you build your team, you want to be sure that you're building your board to cover all of your needs, right? Every person that's on the board should be able to contribute something very specific. So, maybe, I don't know, like if you're early stage, do you need someone who is all clinical experience yet? Not yet, right? You probably want someone maybe with a BD background or someone who's built a company before, something to help you get past that first, seed, pre-seed stage. And then when you get investment, part of having investment is that you're going to take a board seat. Sometimes part of having, whether it's VC or CVC, someone's likely going to take a board seat. And then when you get to the next stage of your company, you say, okay, now I need to understand, I don't know, maybe I need to understand how to bring something ready for development. Well, okay, maybe now you add somebody onto your board who has worked in the development space a lot, right? It's just, you should be adding them as they're needed to add value to your company without necessarily taking up seats before you're ready, right? And so I'm not sure that I would say, oh, this person got investment from a VC, therefore let me put them on my board. Because if they can't serve a purpose outside of that on your board, you've now wasted a seat and you've wasted equity, right? And who knows, likely when you actually get investment, they probably end up getting, reorganized off your board. But absolutely, hey, what is this venture firm like to work with? What's important to them? Can you give me a warm introduction? Who should I be talking to? Those sorts of things that you should do. But I would reserve your board seats, and ultimately your equity is really what you're reserving closely, because what you don't want is a super messy cap table while you're trying to get your first rounds of investment, because it's a turnoff. And again, those investments, it's not about you, it's about them, right? It's about their ability to get a return. And in order to do that, they need to be able to have a certain size position in your company. And you also don't want too many people that get to make decisions about your company. And so, maybe it's been, maybe you were able to raise all your first amounts of funds through friends and family, which shouldn't have any equity, but maybe you also took a bunch of angel investors that may or may not understand the nuances. And let's say you've already given away 20% of your company and you're only at pre-seed. It's problematic. It makes it hard for the next person to invest without taking your whole company. And so, if someone really, really wants to partner with you, they'll help you clean up your cap table. It's usually like buying out people or renegotiating the terms of their contract. But these are the kind of things that you want to really be protective of to make you look favorable for that first seeded round. Because then after that, you have investors, and they're going to sort of help guide you and kind of control what comes next. They're going to tell you when you can raise again and when you can't. So you just got to be really protective to get that first seed investment. And seed meaning like not seed, series investment, meaning that there's actually a price to it.
Yeah, seed investments are also rather big these days, I think in the billions when you look at the AI space. You mentioned this equity, throwing around with equity like confetti. I mean, I'm close to 50 now, and I grew up in a world basically where I learned that when you need people occasionally, you put them on an advisory contract. So it's 1 hour there, 1 hour there, 1 hour there. When you think someone is one of the key players, like, for example, a former CEO of a company who developed a public company, is well connected in the VC world, this would be an asset for the company. So you basically hire this person, get them in an executive role, a board role, executive board role, and give them some stock options. So it's a combination of salary, bonuses, stock options, basically.
Mhm.
And when you want to have someone on the cap table, they need to bring capital to the table. So they need to invest. This is basically the world that I got to know. And it's about 10 years ago that I learned that in the startup world, there exists a different thinking where people offer equity for, you have contacts, I give you equity and you give me your contacts. What do you think about this habit? Is this a good one? I mean, so companies have basically given away 20 to 30% of equity to consultants initially, and then also sign up other consultants with success fees, and they give away another 20% with success fees. How do you see that habit of using equity instead of cash compensation?
So it's the actual model, right, for Williams Biotech Consulting is, for companies that have capital, great, they pay me straight out their pocket. However, most of the companies I work with are pre-seed. It's actually where
Mm.
I like to be. So their only tool is equity and a combination of success fees. Now, you use the example of 20%. If someone's giving away 20% of their company up front, they don't have a company anymore. So no one should be giving away percentages like that to a non-investor. So let's just start, let's just start there. But you know, having a percentage of nothing is still nothing. And so you really need to decide, where you're at. There's a reason why the companies that I work with are all outside of the US, because it's very much what we're talking about now is, hey, we've been working on this company for a while. We have some investment from EU or APAC investors, but we can't break into the US market. We can't get anyone's attention. Maybe we only have so much of a runway left. We either need investment or we need a strategic partnership. Can you help us with one or the other? Obviously, with my last role, having been the type of person you tried to engage to get a strategic partnership, that is where the bulk of my value that I extend exists. And so I would never ask somebody for 20% of their company, because again, I'm not going to win, because there's not going to be any company. All right, there's not going to be any company to be had. But for a percentage, if you don't have money, plus a success fee, that is exactly what I do. I guarantee that I can get you in front of any large or mid-size company, whether it's their BD person, their SME person, or their technical lead, to share your deck with them. Now, I didn't say I guarantee that I will get you I'll guarantee that I'll get you a partnership, because these are two different, they're two very different things. But the first step is just having your information seen. And then the second part of it, and which I think I've said several times, is that the story is important. The narrative is important. You can't just walk in and say, and here's my data, go. Especially if you're not talking to a technical lead. Maybe you're talking to the S&E person, and the S&E person has an idea of what they need to go out and bring in internally. Like, let's say when I was at Lilly, I knew that I needed to find delivery. I knew that we wanted to win on delivery in a few places. And so I went out and I looked at every deck that existed on the planet that I could get my eyes on, right, about some kind of delivery. Um, but the ones who really got my attention are the ones that had the stories that I could go back and tell. So it wasn't just here's my data. It was here's my data and this is how you can use it, because I know that one, let's say you already had a partnership with X, Y, and Z. Maybe it was for an API. And so you could use our stuff to deliver this thing. Like they'd already given me ways, like possible use cases for their data. And so then, or for their technology. So then when you go back internally, because you kind of have to sell the story up, right? The person that you meet, in no big company are they going to be the end all be all. Like this is the one person I need to convince, and only this one person has to make a decision. No, there's so many people involved because you're talking about a lot of money, right? Now, I might have been your gateway in to sell with enthusiasm your technology internally. Like, hey, no, you really have to look at this deck, but look at this thing. It is so great. I know you're interested about this other company, but I really like this. Like, that's going to be my job, right? And to put together the story and tell everybody internally like why we need this thing. It's the same thing I think, same thing I do now is that, okay, I have a fair amount of insight into what's interesting for other companies just from, some of my positions before. And, um, uh, people that work everywhere. And so you just sort of start asking questions and they'd be like, okay, no, this is what I know about this company. They are interested in assets, not platforms, and they want something that they can take to blank or they're trying to solve this problem. So we're going to put this deck together in the context of that exact problem. It means that you don't get to use this deck with every company. It means that we're going to put this deck together for company A, and we're going to tell them the story that they want to hear, but then we're going to switch up this deck a little bit because company B, they have a different problem. Your thing can solve that problem, but you got to frame it in a way that sounds good to, good to them. And then once we have a story that I think that we could sell, then I'll put it in front of someone. These two things, it might sound trivial, but you're never going to get past go, right? Unless you have these two things, unless you can tell somebody a story in a way that they want to hear it, and you can actually get it in front of them so they want to see it. And so that is exactly what I do. And sort of the reputation at this point that I'm trying to build with my company is that, look, if I'm willing to represent a biotech, right, you should be able to trust that we've had a sort of come to Jesus conversation about what things should look like. We have tailored our deck to meet to sort of meet your needs. There's some vetting in that they're reasonable people to work with, because if I'm going to work with them, and I don't have to work with anyone, so I'm not going to work with anyone that I don't want to, that I don't want to work with. If I'm working with them, they must be reasonable people to get along with. And so let's take all of that and let's look at what I have to present. And so, that's sort of the way that I'm going and what I hope to build.
I absolutely see the value that you bring to companies who wants to enter California, who wants to get in touch with people you worked with in the past already. And there is a lot of value in what you say. I mean, especially when it comes to sales. I mean, it's a high stakes game.
It
People
is.
usually in drug development don't ask for $10 or $20 or $30. They want to have 20, 30, 40 million at least, or 2 to 3 billion. So it's quite funny when you then send a standardized big pitch deck around and say, hey, look at it. If something sticks, let me know, come back and then wire the money. It makes sense to really spend some time and finding out what problems do they
Yeah,
have. And does your solution at this point in time really solve a problem of the business developer in that pharma company at this point in time?
exactly. And if you're lucky, sometimes the problem is, hey, we just want to expand. We want to add a new vertical. We want to something that complements what we already have. And so then they're out there looking for companies, not necessarily to solve a problem, but to create something new for them. Great, right? It's just about being able to get some kind of insight into their motivation, because you want to just, if you only have 30 minutes in front of them, you want to have the conversation that they want to hear. You don't
Mhm.
want to talk about all the other things. And then now you've wasted your time. It actually used to be one of my pet peeves at partnering conferences. I was very clear. I would come in, like I even made a little sheet. I said, hey, this is what I'm looking for today. And this is why I reached out to you. I'd even write it in the email. This is the information I would like you to share with me today. I would put it in the email so everyone was ready. And then sometimes people would show up and they would talk to you about everything except the thing that you wanted them to talk about. And, I would let them talk, introduce themselves. Maybe they talk for 5 minutes, 8 to 10 tops. And then I would stop and say, hey, we only have 20 minutes left. I want to have some time for questions. Can we just skip ahead and get to this thing that I want? And you would be surprised how many, whether it's the CEO or the technical lead or the BD, could not pivot away from their pre-baked story and just show me the data that I wanted to see. They'd be like, okay, well, but this is also really great. So let me show you this, this, and this. You got to understand how big pharma is organized. When it comes to BD, it can either be centralized or decentralized, right? You can have, let's say, one sort of innovation team, and that person goes out and looks for all the things that the company needs. And so they want to hear about oncology. They want to hear about, pick your thing, neuroscience. They want to hear about it all. Or companies are organized in like within the TA, as was the case sort of with Lilly. And so when I went out, I only wanted to hear about RNA or just nucleic acids, because that is the team that I led. And I only wanted to hear about neuroscience, diabetes or its complications, or immunology, because those were the TAs that I supported. Somebody else ran oncology. And so people would come and I would tell them up front, like, yeah, don't talk to me about oncology, don't tell me this and this, but this is what they're still, talking about. And so I know I said it with VCs. I'm gonna say the same thing with pharma. If you only get one or two shots to meet with these people, why would you waste your shot by telling them all the things when they only want to know one? You got to do a little bit of work to ask around, like, hey, how are they organized? Is this person going to do this, or is this person going to do that? You can connect and reach out to people on, LinkedIn, and just ask questions, because this part is not a secret. Asking how somebody is organized is not a trade secret, right? If you just find someone that's helpful, they'll tell you. So when you go into that meeting, like, okay, Renee only does RNA. Stop talking to her about small molecules. No, I'm not just going to, maybe I'll pass it off to my colleague if I remember. Maybe I won't. It really depends on how relationships are. Mm-hmm. But if you get my time, please talk to me about things that I want to hear. And so, that's sort of my sweet spot is creating your narrative, right? And organizing your data in such a way that, okay, we're ready. Let's go put it in front of the vaccine person. And we're only going to talk about vaccines. I know you do 10 other things, but I only want her interest on vaccines. And when she's hooked, then we can talk about the other things that you do. But I don't want her attention to be, spread all over the place. I just want her to see how great this is for her and whatever her requirements are. And so I guess if we leave with one thing today, it's do your homework. And It's not easy. It's not like just on the website, it's going to tell you everything you want. This is why you have to build networks. This is why you have to have communities. This is why you just need to ask questions and you got to pull it all together. It's like a treasure hunt, right? To get it done.
I totally agree. I think it's a sales job, basically. So don't make it about yourself, make it about them and help people solve their problem. And I think what you said, I mean, this is it's gold, basically. You need to understand what this person in their role need at this point in time, which information. And when you ask them to say it, just say, okay, what do you need for the next step? And usually people give you the information and then you can deliver that.
Exactly. And to be clear, I'm not saying that you should change your science or go back and do these extra experiments before anyone has committed capital. All I'm saying is that you could take exactly what you have and frame it in a different way. It only costs you time, which I know we're all busy, but if that's what you need to do, great. Not necessarily like, oh, these people are oncology. We don't have oncology. Let's start oncology. If they haven't made an investment in you or signaled that if you do this thing, don't go spending your money in that way. But change your story. change your story to fit the person that you're talking to.
Sales is a skill necessary for a biotech company. I believe that. And this is also the reason why I'm not so huge fan of success fee only contracts or equity only contracts. What we talked about in the last half hour is basically deal making with venture capitalists, deal making with pharma companies, and any kind of deal usually lasts a minimum of a year. And the bigger the deals, the longer the duration. So what companies need is a perspective to survive for 12 to 24 months when they start the deal process. And what I learned with these equity or success fee-based contracts, people usually tend to this kind of contracts when they're out of money. So my question always is, okay, how do you make sure that you exist long enough so that you can close a deal?
Are you talking about from a consultant point of view? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, are you saying you don't you maybe I misunderstood the question. You're saying that you don't care for success and equity only contracts. You're saying from the viewpoint of a consultant?
My point is that when I see companies handing out contracts to consultants that are success fee or equity based only, it's more or less a matter of survival. So they are out of cash, they have a very short runway and are desperate for a deal. What we talked in the last half hour is basically that any kind of deal that is a little bit bigger lasts at least 12 months. It takes 12 months from the first contact to closing a deal. So my question to these companies, when they don't have cash, can't negotiate a contract with a cash component, do you have really such a long runway? Can you survive for the next 12 to 24 months? Or do you just try
Mm.
to hook people up and hope for a quick shot for a 3 month deal?
Yeah, if you are in talks with a big pharma, right? Maybe you're working on a term sheet and okay, you're out of money. You're If you have venture backing, that's usually enough signal for them to keep you alive long enough to get this deal, sort of to get this deal done. If you don't have money, it's at least hopeful. I wouldn't not work on closing this deal over 12 months, but just because it takes 12 months, but I also would have to focus on other, sort of other things as well. A lot of companies don't like to do POC, so like proof of concept or MTA, because they say it pulls away from their time and their resources, and don't necessarily get anything in return. To a degree, to an extent, I agree. But a POC, especially if it's designed well, and sort of can be something that you can do quick, and at least get some pass-through costs. That's very different than an upfront, right? It's, hey, what's your rough budget to be able to perform these experiments? And, maybe put a little extra 5% or something on it. But that's very different than saying, okay, this is a POC, give me $10 million to do it. The answer is going to be no, right? It's you could even use those to stay alive just a little bit longer, and hopefully if you negotiated them well enough. Like I said, you have your pass-through costs, but now you also have additional data that you can use elsewhere. It'll likely have to be scrubbed down, right? When you do a POC or an MTA, no company is going to want to be able to use their name, because it kind of signals what it is that they're interested in looking for and all of that. But you should at least be able to use it sort of in a scrubbed down way. So, okay, now maybe I have something more to try to go get a deal with. Or one of the things I usually would do is I would allow a company to use that name or that relationship only when raising funds. So only on your VC deck and only under NDA could you say, and we did a POC with this large company, because even then that gives you a little bit of validation, right, to the next. But at the end of the day, how biotechs stay alive is either through investment and or partnerships. Both are hard to do, but I also think maybe, yeah, both are hard to do. So, but I would never not pursue contracting, especially for an early stage company, contracting with a large company, just because it takes a long time, because it's always going to take a long time. And once you get that first one, that is, again, sort of de-risking and a signal to the rest of the industry, like, okay, you're a company that we should be thinking about working with. And FOMO is a real thing. So fear of missing out,
Oh
dear
yeah.
God,
Oh yeah.
right? It'd be like, oh, you see this you see some posting, right? And it says such and such company did how many ever $1 million deal or $1 billion biobucks with this other small biotech. And then instant you get emails. Did we look at this company? How come we didn't do a deal with this company? And they're like, FOMO is a thing. And so getting that first one is crucial. However you get there, right? Getting that first one is crucial, even if you have to scrape and not pay yourself a salary and all that kind of stuff to get to that first deal. It definitely de-risks you, put your name out there, and have other people just wondering about you just because.
Yeah, absolutely. Partnerships matter. Also, people on the team matter. When you have someone who already exited the company or built a company, has expertise, this all matters. I mean, formal, absolutely, you're absolutely right. I
Mhm.
think COVID was one such event where it was so obvious. I mean, about vaccines, nobody talked before 2020. And I
Mhm.
always heard, I helped developing vaccine companies back in 2013 and 14, and they always heard it's dead. Nobody wants to do
Yes.
anything in vaccines. 2020 changed that, and suddenly you saw all big pharma companies. Do we have a vaccine program? Do we? Where can we get one? And if it's not RNA, is there anything else on the market that we can purchase? I think now with GLP-1, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly and all the space of obesity um, uh,
Mhm.
develops incredibly well, and I think we are probably in a bubble territory with a little bit of FOMO. And you had a lot of expertise in RNA, I read in the preparation. Uh, I mean, RNA was basically no topic before 2020 in the public eye and on mainstream media and on social media. March 2020 changed that. And I think the current perception of RNA is it's just for COVID. And that's all. And
Mm.
it's a vaccine. When you don't want to get COVID, you just take the vaccine and then you don't have the problem anymore. My question to you is there anything else RNA technology can do except uh, a fail safe against COVID?
Yeah. So, I think that, well, I know what my opinion is, and I think that the field would agree that the bottleneck to RNA is not the payload itself. Um, it has much more to do with the delivery. So, as a field, we have a pretty strong understanding of nucleic acid designs, but we really lack the tools to deliver things precisely. And to get them to go where we want them to go, or maybe more importantly, to avoid places that we don't want them. We don't want them to go. And so I get it that people say, okay, it can only work for vaccines. It's not the case. Like there are all sorts of, I mean, that's why there's so many different therapeutic areas and so many indications that companies work towards. And it's not that the payload isn't great. It's really about this payload is great as long as we get it to where we need to go. Otherwise, we have, let's say, too many off-target effects, or which is usually what it is, right? There's too many off-target effects. We're knocking down genes in regions that we don't want to knock them down. And so, I don't want to say that RNA is not limited. RNA delivery is limited. And I promise when we start to unlock delivery, you'll see so far more things out there. So I think like right now, let's take Alnylam, right? Alnylam has an Alzheimer's disease sRNA against APP. It is being delivered with a lipid, so something similar to the components of a lipid like a lipid nanoparticle, which was used to deliver the COVID mRNA vaccine, but instead of being a nanoparticle, it's just a lipid. Um, that has to be delivered intrathecally, so like a needle in the spine. Because now we have this confined region, more or less, the CNS. And so now you say, okay, well, I don't have targeted delivery, but I at least have it in the right region. And now it can, uptake in the cells that we need it to uptake and knock down and so forth. You have people working on, let's say, like blood-brain barrier type shuttles, whether it is maybe a small molecule or maybe it's a biologic, whatever the case is, to get things there. Those are still specific, but not targeted. Um, For the targeted things, and obviously I'm not going to share company names because the reason why I know them is from confidential means, but there are companies out there that are very close that are working on, hey, we know that in order to, let's say, address neurodegenerative diseases, I can't just get cellular uptake. I need cellular uptake in neurons specifically. So what is it about neurons? Let me design some sort of delivery that will uptake there specifically, but not other places. And so I've seen enough out there to know that it's coming, right? It's almost there. And once we get those sort of uptakes, then we'll have to look again at safety and all of that sort of stuff. But RNA is not limited. Delivery is limited, but we're working on it. So stay tuned.
So RNA is basically doesn't have limits. What does that mean?
Say again.
You said I understood you in a way that you said RNA is not limited. What does that mean for patients?
Well, because the sort of the preface of this was that RNA can only work for vaccines. Not the case, right? Yes, we used mRNA for vaccines, but there are ASOs, siRNA, saRNA, gene editing, gene therapy. There are all sorts of nucleic acid based, right? Because some of them are DNA, so let me not say RNA, but nucleic acid based therapeutics out there that, again, when we get them to deliver just right, that it will sort of open up the world here of what we see. And so I gave the one example of alnylam, right? So here's an RNA in a different form, right? It's not mRNA, so it's got a different mechanism of action. I haven't looked this one up in a while. I don't know where we are. Maybe we're at phase 2 or something with it now. But I think when that hits the market, or if that gets approved, rather, people will be looking kind of how they did at COVID vaccine, like, oh, well, look at this. We've addressed something that's really quite massive. And Alzheimer's diseases or dementia in general, it's like a sad disease. It's a sad disease. I think everyone knows someone. And so that's what I meant by limited. It's not limited to vaccines. It can be used therapeutically. There's lots of, there's more than enough evidence on lots of different types of modalities. Now it's, can we do it in a safe way? And quite often safe means delivering to the place that we need it to be and not to other places. And it also means that when we think about from just a cost perspective, we know, for instance, if you deliver the way that we have things now, if you deliver them, let's say intravenously, right, whether it's in an LNP or you have some sort of lipid, everything ends up in the liver, right? And then the liver gets rid of it. But if the goal was to get it to, I don't know, let me make it up, the spleen, and only 10% goes to the spleen, okay, great, that works. But then how big is the dose? How much am I going to have to make per person? How much is that person going to have to pay, right, to get this spleen therapeutic, because all of it's being wasted to the liver. And so those are the kinds of things that are being worked on, not, hey, we can't figure out how to design it, but let's figure out a way that when it's ready to come to market, it can be somewhat affordable. I say caveat on the somewhat, but it could be somewhat affordable. We're not wasting tons of it. And it's just doing what we want it to do.
So basically you have a wide range of use cases for RNA-based therapies. 100%. And the huge problem still is delivery in that space.
Yes.
Delivery. So it's not something that will be entirely solved in the next 12 months. So there's still a lot of opportunities.
Not only will it not entirely be solved, it's not a one solution problem. Depending on where you're trying to go and what you're trying to avoid, this, that, and the other, at the end of the day, there will be a large toolbox of delivery vehicles, whether they're particles. So like I said, obviously we have lipid nanoparticles, there's polymeric nanoparticles, so they have different biodistribution. They're, like I described, sort of like these algal extracellular vesicles to deliver. You have conjugated deliveries. So instead of being like in a vesicle, you have something tethered to the end. There's peptides, there's proteins, there's small molecules. Some of those particles that I described earlier, those also have targeting ligands tethered to them. And so it's a particle plus a tether. There are all different sorts of versions out there, and it's going to be a combination of them that will work best depending on what tissue you're trying to get to, and also how is it going to be administered. It's going to be lots of them to get that done, because LNPs are limited. They work for some things and not well for others.
How is the FOMO in this space? I mean, in 2020, 2021, there was a lot of hype and a lot of tourist investors flocking into this area. How do you see the landscape these days? There is opportunity on the market. Is there enough investment capital? Is there room for investors to invest in that area and exit with a profit 10 years in the future?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely interest because, like I said, it's the field agrees that if we can't deliver, then RNA therapeutics is going to struggle, right? And so, always looking for delivery. People thought like, okay, great, we have LNPs, that's it. Well, no, because you can't deliver past the liver if you do so intravenously, and they don't necessarily hold up to say oral pills or things like that. So you know that there needs to be another solution. I think the difference will be is that the vetting of that solution. I like to say that the goalpost is always moving. What was required for that first LNP investment, right? What's going to be required now for, let's say, another LNP investment? It's going to require infinitely more data, right, than that first investment, because we've learned things. We are, back then we didn't know what we didn't know. Now we know what we don't know. And so if there's going to be investment, you're going to have to improve on those things, right? It's not going to be a me too sort of investment like, hey, we already have LNPs. My thing works equally as well as LNPs. Then why would I invest? What is your differentiator, right? What's going to take you to the next level? And so I think it becomes increasingly more difficult for companies to achieve investment because the ask and your proof needs to be so much stronger. But I also think that this is where innovation comes from. So instead of, it was like, okay, we have LNP, and then you had companies doing every other version of LNP. Well, I use different ionizable lipids, and I use cationic, and I use anionic, and I do that. It was just, version 1.1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the same thing. And then finally, you had someone that said, okay, look, there's no more room in the IP space. I can't think of any other new way to do an LNP. How about I just do something different? Okay, now I'm going to do polymeric nanoparticles. So they're not lipids at all. These are all going to be, sort of synthetic, and let's see how they can behave differently than lipids. What can I do? I want to focus on things that let's say a lipid nanoparticle can't do. So now I've created a differentiated space for myself. So both a PNP and an LNP can exist simultaneously, and maybe invest in both, because they're not necessarily competing if you're playing in different white spaces, right? And so then you have folks doing PNPs, and then you might have you had a whole group of people saying, well, what about mammalian EVs, so extracellular vesicles? These should work great. So then you had companies, a whole bunch of companies doing that. It turns out mammalian is not great. And then you have liposomes, and then you have exosomes, right? And so every time you get to a new category, the sort of first person in that category, they have the hurdle of showing how they're different and or better, or than what exists. But your proof about what can they actually do, the bar is a bit lower, because you always have people that want to be first movers. First movers is where all the money is made if it hits. And so your bar might be a little bit lower. But if you're company number 6 on, in this case, let's say exosomes, well, now we already saw what companies 1 through 5 did. You have to be really great if you're going to come in as like another me too. And when you kind of get to that moment, like when you feel like the plateau is there, that's when the next innovation comes. And so, do I think that we're stuck and there's nowhere to go? No. I think that when the next plateau hits, there's enough different people with different experiences, with creative backgrounds, that it'll be like, look at this. And so maybe it's algal, maybe we're there, right? Oh, I found something that can be delivered at room temperature, do vaccines and other things. I'm in. And I think that's how all innovation is. Everyone runs, you hit a plateau, You try to figure out what is my blue ocean? Where else can I go? Okay, let me pivot over here and try this new thing.
Yeah, especially in the area where patents basically create the winner takes it all market. It's better to not focus on Me Too, becoming the next Me Too
Well,
version, but really focus on something.
well, yeah, I say this with a caveat. So being a fast follower is a reasonable, strategy, but it's a reasonable strategy for follower number one or follower number two. It's not always a reasonable strategy for follower number 10 because you're not really a fast follower anymore. You're just a follower, right? And you got a lot of things that you have to overcome. But yeah, when you're fast follower number 2 or 3, all you have to do is not all, but you look at number 1 and say, okay, what can't they do? Great. I'm going to take that same thing, tweak it a little bit, and go do the space that they're not playing. And now, oh, look, this is how I'm differentiated. But you kind of run out of places to tweak along the way. And then that's when you got to go do something brand new.
When I think about the time 2020, 2021, I think I've never seen a time in any industry where so much capital and so much public attention moved to one space from one day to the other. And I never calculated it, but I think it were probably 1 to 2 trillion that were immediately invested in this area by public and private investors. What has this done to the industry? How changed it after that? Because I mean, after 2022, I think from one day to the other, the pond was dry. So no trillions were flocking in. How did you perceive that in the RNA space, this dynamic? Is this good for the industry when there is this hype cycle and then there is this cliff and then there is just normal business? Or is it detrimental to the industry when you have these ups and downs?
Well, okay, for RNA specifically, COVID did, it's like, let me preface this. I'm talking about just what it did for RNA. Obviously, COVID validated the idea of RNA therapeutics, right? Without COVID, there was still no real use case out there. All there was the memories of, 50, 60, 70 years ago, everyone rushing to clinic, not really thinking about, or not knowing, again, you don't know what you don't know, that you needed to stabilize the molecules and deliver the molecules and all that kind of thing. And it was just an epic failure. And then all the money went away, right? People still working on it a little bit in the background. Heck, my PhD was in oligonucleotides, and I didn't even know what they were back then because no one talked about them because it was all about proteomics. So yeah, COVID was great for RNA, and in terms of, let's say, the markets, stock, things like that. If you invested in RNA companies at the time, um, that were trading, at $10, $15, $16, like Moderna, you did well. Fortunately, I happened to be in that bucket. When I looked around and I said, to be honest, I had never really done the stock market before COVID, and I kind of looked around. And I was like, okay, here's a great moment to where all I have to do is know science. I don't have to understand the stock market to make a decision because everything has changed, right? It has nothing to do about betas and things trading higher and lower. Everything has crashed. What do I think makes sense? And so I kind of looked around and I said, okay, well, I think that this is going to be a moment for RNA therapeutics. Who's doing, or RNA, vaccines? Who's doing something? Moderna. Great. We'll invest a little bit in that. I was like, I'm sure that there's going to be, someone's going to think about a small molecule or something. I know Gilead always has a treasure trove of things on the shelf. And I think they're going to throw their hat into the ring. And you just kind of went around and sort of spread your bets like that. And it was quite useful that mRNA rose to the challenge and kind of gave life to the industry. Now, I think all of that has leveled out. I believe at the beginning of COVID, Moderna might have been trading at, I don't know, like $17, $18, $19, somewhere around there. And I think at one point they might have peaked at $300-$400. You'll have to fact check me on this one. And that happened all within the matter of like a year. You can't really, from a stock market point of view, I don't think you could predict those kind of things, right? Because it was such a crazy time. Are you fact checking me? Did you find the
I can,
what
will you give me a
what
second?
were they? Yeah, what were they trading at? So, I don't spend a whole lot of time studying the stock markets. I don't really know necessarily like how did it, how did it affect now relative to other things? Where were they at?
Yeah, with here in 2012, let's say in December 2019, you had Moderna at 18, $19. And then the peak was, I think, in 2021, September
Yeah, there you
2021,
go, 400. Yeah, I know a few
$430. Yeah.
people. There's someone I work with. We were he was a postdoc in my in my PhD lab, and that's where he went after his postdoc. Just kind of trekking along. Like one day he's doing fine, and the next day he's doing much much better. So yeah,
That's
in
true.
terms of just long term, what does this look like on the stock market? I don't really know. I didn't spend a whole lot of time in that space, but I do think that it's given some credence to RNA, and the investment comes back into the space. People see that it's, even though it was a vaccine, that it's still possible. And they understand that at this point it's about delivery. And you know, I'm sort of all in on RNA because when it reaches its potential, right now we're thinking about disease in a different way. We're not trying to manage symptoms, right? We're not trying to sort of keep things at bay. We have the ability, in some with some modalities, to provide functional cures, and that's big. Especially if you think about, I try to think about diseases that are hereditary. Um, one of the concerns with, let's say, editing is, what does that mean for your progeny, right? If I'm editing here, what happens downstream, downstream, downstream? Don't know if we know that answer yet, but what if the answer is, okay, if we edit out, whatever XY disease is, and we know it's hereditary, it also means that it's not going to show up in your children or your children's children. That's really quite powerful. And that's not anything that a small molecule or biologics can do. And so I think if you think about impact, it's worth the effort and it's worth the investment to try to make it a reality.
Yeah, maybe we become all superheroes when we can edit some genes out and stuff like Marvel Universe. I didn't look so much into the Moderna case, but more in the BioNTech case. And I think a result of the pandemic is at BioNTech, right after the pandemic, I think it was a year ago that I looked last time at the balance sheet of BioNTech. They had 20 billion euros. It's pretty much equal to dollars
Oh,
on their balance sheet. When I think about the average European fund, they are happy when they raise a fund of 100 to 150 million.
mm-hmm.
And BioNTech had a year ago 20 billion on their bank account, with a huge team of people who are really passionate about drug development, really passionate about moving the entire mRNA, RNA space forward. Also in other disease areas. I mean, I think it's with that cash position and that team in the background, it's just a matter of time, in my opinion, that they solve one problem after the other and bring a new therapeutic to the market. And it's more or less a matter of cash, and BioNTech has it. And I'm pretty sure that Moderna is in a similar position.
Yeah, with BioNTech, you saw last year that they purchased a small company called Excerna.
Mm.
Excerna has a proprietary, what do you call them, ionizable lipids. And so, they sort of signaled like, okay, great. We created a lipid nanoparticle. We were able to provide vaccines to millions and millions of people. We recognized that there were some challenges with that lipid nanoparticle. Can we improve on that? Create new IP. And you see that, just as you said, they had a very strong cash position. They used some of that cash position to try to innovate, right? And so they made this purchase, and I'm sure that they are actively working to create new IP around LNPs, and ideally with different biodistributions and the ability to encapsulate different types of payloads and so forth. And so, it's great. It's great. I want to see what comes next.
it's capital well allocated in these companies. So when you really have people who are passionate about moving an area forwards that is crucial for society, I mean, healing diseases is one of the most important areas. And when you give those people capital, I think they always do something interesting and something good for
right?
society.
Every movement needs a champion. It needs champions, and in this case, it's great. We saw that it works. We helped millions and millions of people. Okay, great. What's next? And so
Yeah.
that's what I like to focus on is what's next.
Renee, we said earlier, time flies when we have fun. It's really great talking to you, but I see that we are over 2 hours and
Are
probably we
we?
can. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Couldn't even
yeah.
tell.
It's really fun talking to you. Um, I would like to move to the final questions in the last few minutes. I hope you have 5 to 10 minutes more.
I do. I do. Yes, let's go.
Super, super. Before I come to the final part of the conversation, is there anything open? Is there any parts that we didn't tackle yet that you would like to address at the final stretch?
No, we've talked, we've kind of talked all around today. So let's have your final questions.
Super. You started your own company, so you left Big Pharma and are available on the market. What's your market position with Williams Biotech Consulting?
So yeah, I just got started this year, and so still building. The way that I position myself is it's what I described earlier. Is that when I think about the things that my access and the things that I do best, I really like that we position ourselves in providing services around being fractional CBOs, accepting advisory board and let's say like independent director seats where appropriate. And I think this is a great niche. For us was not necessarily a place where, let's say, much larger consulting firms can fit, or even is part of their strategy. I really would like to, the goal is to grow. And so I'd really like to onboard, I don't know, maybe another 2 or 3 very talented, really experienced operators so we can work with more, just be able to work with more companies. Right now, the scope is and bandwidth is really just what I can do. And so that doesn't really allow us to help as many companies or serve as many companies as I'd like. And then ultimately, I think the goal here, what I strive for, is really like the industry to see Williams Biotech Consulting as a premier firm for accelerating, let's say, pre-seed companies to investment and getting them partner ready, such that there's always an interest, whether it's like from large pharma or mid caps or VCs, to engage with our clients. Now, maybe that sounds like an accelerator. I'm not interested in being an accelerator, right? I'm not going to help you with legal and tell you what to do, maybe a little bit tell you what to do through research, but really it's just sort of being that place for new founders to get a wealth of knowledge without having to scour the universe. Because I stand by my statements earlier, so you have to do your homework before you start engaging people and you ask. And I think that with people like myself and hopefully whoever I'm able to bring on next, we can make that a little bit less daunting, right? Where you can kind of find your answers more or less all in one place. And so, yeah, that's what I'm looking to do and hoping to build out over the next year or two.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you will. When people listen to this episode,
Yes.
what kind of customers are you looking for? What kind of companies should reach out to you?
Huh. Thanks for asking. So I have two sets of customers. While the sort of fractional CBO board independent is ultimately where I want to be, that does not yet pay the bills because, as we mentioned earlier, these are definitely sort of equity and success fee models because pre-seed companies don't have money, right? And so I'm not going to suck up all that money. And so the other thing that I do as a balance is I generally work as like a general consultant. And so people come to me and ask, like, let's say, okay, one of the things that have shifted right between VCs and companies, at least in the RNA space, is you used to have to be good at RNA or good at delivery. But now that you realize that delivery is such a problem, the request has shifted, and it's like, hey, companies, even our current portfolio companies, you have to be great at both. Well, that poses a problem for companies who have built themselves to be great at one thing, right? And so now if you have a lot of money, no problem. You can just go hire, new in-house talent and then pivot. But that's not where most of the companies that I work with exist. They're in a place where it's like, okay, well, we can afford to pay you 40, 60 hours to help us figure out where we should be in the like where we sit in the landscape. So if I'm a delivery company and I'm thinking about putting together new APIs, should it be siRNA? Should it be ASNOs? Should we be thinking about gene editing? Should we be thinking about gene therapy? And if we do, where should we play? What makes the most sense? And so from a strategy point of view, that's sort of the other place I sit, and the thing that I think that I do well. So companies looking for, help us, guide us. Where should we go? Maybe we haven't been getting any kind of traction. We're maybe 6 months out from running out of runway. What should we do? What should be this Hail Mary? Also, okay, we feel maybe a little bit more established. We don't need or want to pay for a full-time chief business officer because we don't need that. But maybe we caught a company's interest and we've never negotiated a deal before. We have no idea what we're doing. Can we bring you on for, the term of this deal to make sure that one, we don't, get taken advantage of, but two, we also have somebody who's closed deals, know what it is that we should be fighting for. And so anywhere in that space. And then also, like I kind of mentioned twice now, is that I enjoy providing insight. And so maybe what you need is an independent board member, and from that, to give you a little bit of to your board when you're looking for more investment. Or maybe it's just we need an advisor. Maybe we need someone to talk to from time to time. And so sort of that business development space is where I live, and would love to meet new companies and have people reach out.
Yeah, this is great advice when you want to close a deal or structure a deal and you've never done it before. Get somebody on board occasionally.
It's long, yeah, it's overwhelming, and there's so much stuff that you don't know, and you can't ask the other side. And by the way, can you just tell me blank, right? You gotta figure it out. And so I think that's also a great place for Williams Biotech Consulting to provide value.
That's true. My final question to you.
Yes.
When we assume that you're at a conference, for example, and a young entrepreneur approaches you and you have just 1 minute, and they ask you for one single advice. With all your expertise, what is this one single advice that you would give a young entrepreneur in the biotech industry?
I would say, what would I say? I've said it so many times, right? Do your homework, seek knowledge and listen, ask lots of questions, take feedback, and build relationships. These are the things that you need, not just your good science. These are the things that you need to get deals done.
Sound advice. Renee, it's amazing talking to you. I could go on for another 2 hours. There's so much value and so much insight that you bring to this conversation, and I can encourage everybody who wants to find someone in San Francisco, reach out to Renee Williams and ask her whether she is up to helping you reach out to investors, structuring deals, getting a pitch deck ready.
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's easy enough. Renee the Chemist. Thank you so much for this invitation. Well, first, thank you for coming to my talk and my panel at BioEU, and then reaching out afterwards. This has been fantastic, and love to do it again. Thank you.
Yeah, let's catch up in a year or so and see how the industry evolved. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.